All right, so let's talk about American solidarity. Cultural solidarity. The Good Neighbor policy was effectively domestic within the United States. About 40%, 1940, about 72% of Americans thought Cuba should be defended. 53% would defend Brazil, Chile, and any South American country. Only 17% are going to defend the United Kingdom, which is saying a lot. So Americans are much more willing as a country to defend the countries in the American hemisphere than they are to defend Europe. The American solidarity, Latin American economic goods now came almost exclusively from the United States and Canada. So the goods that people in the Caribbean countries and in South America are getting, are receiving, and using are coming predominantly from the United States and from Canada. U.S. raw material imports from Latin America is going to be growing. Chilean copper, Peruvian cotton, and Mexican oil. So the United States is depending heavily on the goods coming out of Latin America, and that's going to be influencing what's going on as well. Moving on, military solidarity. The United States air bases and ports in Brazil were established for mid-Atlantic patrols, allowing them to control what's going on in the mid-Atlantic region. Colombia, the Dominican Republic, and Ecuador are given aid to build militaries, primarily air forces, as a way of protecting the Panama Canal. The United States must protect the Panama Canal, and this is a way of allowing them to do that. The Atlantic Charter in the summer of 1941, the United States will seek the final destruction of Nazi tyranny. It's going to be basically a roadmap in setting up the United Nations later. It's going to build off of the League of Nations, looking at the issues that came about from the League of Nations and building this into something bigger after the war. It's anti-imperialist document legally supported by most Latin American countries by 1942. So the Atlantic Charter is something that you definitely must understand. FDR, Churchill are going to secretly meet to decide a new world order, and all allies are eventually going to sign this pledge. This is where the United States is moving towards war. The Atlantic Charter, 1941, which is the original kind of idea behind the United Nations, again, building off the League of Nations into this. It's a broad set of goals for Western democracy before U.S. intervention. Allies would not seek territorial gain, so countries here are not going to try to invade each other for territory, would grant self-determination, allowing countries to determine what's going on in their own country. They're going to lower trade barriers, so get rid of some tariffs. They're looking at the issues that have happened previously. With some of the issues with around the Great Depression and tariffs. They're going to advance social welfare for the benefit of their citizens, provide freedom from want and fear, so allow people to live in peace, and provide freedom of the seas, so protect international shipping and allow the seas to be free. Now, Japanese aggression unchecked in Asia. With the fall of France, French possessions in Asia are now going to be vulnerable. This is going to allow the Japanese to attack British colonies as well, something the British are not really very happy with. The United States is going to decide to stop the shipment of steel and scrap iron and renounce commercial treaty with Japan. So the United States is going to stop trading with the Japanese at this point. At least half of all oil, iron, and steel that the Japanese were using was coming from the United States. Now, if you are fighting a war, you need oil, you need iron, and you need steel. When half of your supply is cut off suddenly, you are in a very problematic position. So if you're looking at the extent that the Japanese kind of just attacked the United States in Pearl Harbor for no reason, this is one of the major reasons they are going to do that. Now, perspective on the U.S. role in Japanese aggression when it comes to Pearl Harbor. Charles A. Beard argued in 1948 that the note was an ultimatum that meant unnecessary war. He suggested it was part of a conspiracy by Roosevelt to get the United States into a war to help Britain fight Germany. Now, this is something that you could argue back and forth. The fact of the matter is Japan did go and attack the United States, and this did lead to World War II. Okay. There was some modern Japanese commentary that say that the whole note was designed to draw Japan into the war in a way that allowed Japan to be presented as the aggressor nation. Again, there's some argument you could make on either side here. If you're going to be doing that, make sure that you are looking at both sides. These interpretations could have gained widespread support in Latin America, for the effectiveness of the Good Neighbor policy. So if you're really looking at to what extent was the Good Neighbor policy successful, one way you could really prove that is by looking at how fast the Latin American countries joined on after the attack at Pearl Harbor and how quick they were to declare war. December 7th, which was the 8th in Japan because time zones, Japan is going to launch a devastating attack against U.S. naval base in Hawaii. United States, Guam, Midway, and the Philippines are also quickly attacked, all controlled by the United States. The U.S. is going to declare war the next day. Germany declares war against the tripartite. United States. Germany declares war against the U.S. per the tripartite pact. So the Germans, the Japanese, and the Italians were all aligned together. If you attack one, you attack all. When Japan declared war on the United States, Germany then responded by doing the same. All 9 independent Caribbean countries also declare war on the Axis powers, which again is showing the effectiveness of the good neighbor policy. All countries in the Americas are going to sever ties with the Axis, with the exception of Argentina and Chile. This is going to happen in Rio in 1942. Remember, Argentina and Chile both have a large German population. They also both have fascist regimes, which are sympathetic to what's going on in Germany. 18 Brazilian ships are going to be sunk by German motives in Brazil to create expeditionary force, and they're going to be getting ready to go. The Brazilians are going to get involved quickly. Chile, government-resistant Allied cooperation, large German population, as I've talked about. Also, its incredibly long coastline makes it incredibly vulnerable to Axis attack. So they're just going to kind of stay out of the situation. Santiago, Chile, the capital, is going to become a hotbed of Nazi spies in the America. Allied success in German attacks in the Atlantic convinced Chile to move away from neutrality, though the spying is going to continue. So they're going to move away, but they're not necessarily going to be independent. They're finally going to declare war in 1945. Main reason they do this is because they realize the United Nations is going to be established. If they don't declare war, they're not going to be allowed in. They want in, and that's basically why they declare war. So Chile was really opportunist in what was happening within World War II. Argentina is firmly pro-Axis due to the fascist tendencies of its own government. It also feared American domination in the region. K. Perón, who was a leader, consolidates power in 1944 and maintained neutrality and consolidated power by keeping pro-Axis and pro-Allied factions at ill ease. So basically, he's going to have the pro-Axis people within Argentina and the pro-Allied people in Argentina fight each other. If they're fighting each other, they're not going to be fighting him. He can be in charge. The last American country to declare war against the Axis was the Argentinians, and they're going to do this in March of 1945. Remember, Hitler dies in May of 1945. So we're not really coming in at the last minute. That's Argentina right through here. Also, Argentina is notorious for where a lot of Nazi criminals would escape to after the war. This is exactly why. Now, Latin America is going to be ambivalent towards Germany. Germany had indirectly helped many countries out of the Great Depression through trade, so they're kind of like, we kind of like you because of this. However, we also kind of don't like you because of our treaties with the Americans. Countries such as Peru had used German officers to train their own troops, so Peruvian soldiers have been trained by the Germans. Nazis were admired for their strong policies because they seemed very strong. They seemed to know what they were doing. Other countries are going to be looking at this as a way of really moving their own country forward. But countries are going to be discomforted by the brutality of the regime. They understand what's happening with Hitler, and they don't like that. They're going to kind of stay out of the situation because of that. FDR is going to be elected to an unprecedented third term. He is still, up until 2020, and per constitutional amendments, will only be the only president elected to a third term. He was running as a wartime president before before the war was actually declared, which again is showing to what, like, he could kind of see the writing on the wall. Some people would argue that he was ready to go to war and really wanting to get involved in the war. That's up to you to look. Okay, you can look at this cartoon right here from Dr. Seuss. "'Tis Roosevelt, not Hitler, that the world should really fear," kind of saying that, like, Roosevelt's the one who wants to get involved in this war. We shouldn't be afraid of Hitler. We should be afraid of what Roosevelt wants to do and the United States wants to do. That is all for this. This is part 2. If you have any questions, comments, put them down below. Again, this is not my own slide. This is something I found online. I'm just narrating it for you. Please put your questions down below. Contact me. We're going to get through this. Hang in there. Good luck.